Welcome everyone to DRJ's webinar series, brought to you today by Evolve IP and Veeam. I'm Bob Arnold, President here at DRJ. We thank you for joining us and we hope you gather some great information from today's webinar. Again, today's sponsors are Evolve IP and Veeam, and the topic today is the risks of Office 365 data backup and retention. It's all on you. And to help introduce our two presenters here, I'd like to welcome and turn the mic over to Kelly Neff with Veeam.
Great, thank you, Bob, and welcome everyone. Hi, I'm Kelly Neff. I'm the National Cloud Marketing Manager here at Veeam. The partnership between Evolve IP and Veeam goes back many years. Evolve IP is a nationally recognized platinum-level cloud and service provider for Veeam. And honestly, they work with hundreds of organizations like yours to deliver what I would say are best-in-class, data backup and disaster recovery services. Just say, believe me, they know their stuff and they're really great to work with. So as Bob just mentioned, today our topic involves the risks of Office 365 data backup and retention. So we'll be covering the major gotchas involved with backing up Office 365 and also, of course, how Evolve IP can help make your job a lot easier. So yes, again, our presenters today are both from Evolve IP and Veeam. So we have Kevin Sullivan, he's Head of Solutions Engineering at Evolve IP, and Brandon McCoy, Cloud Systems Engineer at Veeam. So together, they'll cover what you really need to know about keeping your Office 365 data backed up and available. So as we get started, all participants will be in listen-only mode, but if you have questions, please feel free to put those into the question box of the webinar panel, and then I'll come back at the end of the presentation to get your questions answered. So without further delay, I'll turn the stage over to Kevin from Evolve IP. Kevin?
All right, thank you very much, Kelly. I appreciate that. So as mentioned, my name is Kevin Sullivan. I'm the Manager of Solutions Engineering at Evolve IP. So today we're going to be talking through a little bit of Office 365, some of the risks that can face you as an organization, as well as some ways to really work through protection and ensuring that you have those risks and any gaps covered from a backup perspective. So I'll give you just a bit of background on who Evolve IP is. So Evolve IP is a customized cloud strategy provider headquartered out of Wayne, Pennsylvania. We work with a number of different clients across all different industries and verticals. And one of our core principles here is that we understand that our client requirements aren't cookie cutter. So, they have unique motivations and solutions, and the offerings that we have, while consistent among our client base, are really individual building blocks that come together to form a more holistic solution that can be very unique for every individual client with whom we work. So we are uniquely positioned in the industry as really covering the full breadth of the cloud computing space, as well as unified communications. So this can encompass everything from disaster recovery as a service to desktop as a service, our typical hosting package, which is infrastructure as a service, the ability to do contact center or unified communications as a service as well. And a lot of times we'll get pushback on this, conceptually saying, really, if you're a jack of all trades, can you truly be a master of any of them? And the answer to that here is yes, and Gartner tends to agree with us on that, as we are Gartner recognized in both of these different disparate areas within the business. So both our cloud computing offerings as well as our unified communication offerings are Gartner rated. And the way we go about doing this is with what we consider the Evolve IP One Cloud solution. So with One Cloud, we really take the approach of having, the old expression here would be a single throat to choke, but we're going to deliver exceptional customer service and great solutions. So we prefer to think of it as one back to pad when things are going right. And really, the reason for that is that it allows you to work with us over time to build up a significant amount of accountability, of organizational trust, and of familiarity with companies with whom we're working when we are really touching every facet of their business and technology needs. So the question I often ask prospects with whom we're dealing is, how do you really quantify that organizational knowledge that you gain over time of not only what a business's needs are, but how they internally operate as well? So there's a lot of benefit to really organizing all of these disparate types of solutions with a single provider and working through that. And the way that we deliver those solutions is what we consider to be our blue chip technology partners. So you can see first and foremost here in this slide, we have Veeam, which, as Kelly mentioned, we have a very long-standing and phenomenal relationship. as well as Microsoft, which is what we're going to be discussing today, and a number of other really blue chip industry players, RSA, Cisco, Polycom, Citrix, etc. So to today's topic, so specifically Office 365. Really, what is it in the industry today that is compelling organizations to look to move to Office 365? And we find in the conversations that we have that there are really three compelling motivators. So the first of those is to really simplify a network or reduce infrastructure complexity. So long gone at this point are the days of internally managing an on-prem Exchange environment. So having your own Microsoft Exchange solution, your own in-house on-prem email system, doing the backup and the disaster recovery of that, working with database availability groups to ensure that you have messaging continuity if you were to ever have any form of an issue in your own data center, power outage, network interruption, any number of things that could potentially go wrong. The other is ease of management. So really tying all of your end user management, your account provisioning, the ability to add or remove users into a single portal and one administrative console that you no longer have to be, a systems administrator to be able to go in to set a new account up. You can really provision that task to other folks within your organization, whether they're support related or may not even necessarily have a position in corporate IT within your companies. And then the last is really subscription-based licensing. So this actually is very beneficial on two fronts. So first and foremost, it simplifies the licensing complexity. And I say it half jokingly, but as everyone out there who works with Microsoft knows, the licensing can be very complicated and can become significantly more complex very quickly. I often tell people seems you need a doctorate to truly understand Microsoft licensing, and by the time you would achieve that certification, they fundamentally change the way that it's served to you. So it's a never-ending learning process to really understand exactly how licensing works. So by going to a subscription-based licensing model, you're now enabling yourself to really just consume on a per individual basis. So all of the licensing that you purchase is scalable, and more importantly for many companies, has a predictable cost model that's associated with it, where if you're adding headcount either on a temporary or full-time basis, you know exactly how much that cost is per user. And especially in merger and acquisition driven businesses who may look to add significant amounts of seats at any given time with a very short window, truly understanding what the impact of bringing those folks on from a financial perspective is. Secondly, then we have the concept of delivering the latest and greatest in terms of technology and solutions. So knowing that by having a subscription-based licensing model, if a new version of Office were to come out tomorrow, your licensing entitles you to be able to leverage that software. So you no longer have to worry about going out and doing an off-the-shelf box purchase of software, and then going out and touching every individual machine within your company to do that upgrade. And then lastly, the higher adoption of desktop as a service or VDI as a desktop deployment model or a client workspace model that we see in the industry. That and Office 365 from a licensing perspective work very well together to make provisioning easy, and again, to have that concept of scalability and flexibility. So in terms of why really is backup needed, the thing that we can stress here, the most important takeaway from this entire conversation today, is to understand that from a roles and responsibilities perspective, Microsoft is fully and completely responsible for the infrastructure and the platform for your messaging system if you are on Office 365. However, it's still up to the individual customer to ensure the integrity of their data. So the nicer and easier to understand way of saying that is that Microsoft will ensure the uptime. They will guarantee that the messaging platform will be there. Should they have any infrastructure issues, they can fail you over to another facility within their cloud. But to ensure that you have that data that continues to exist and you have access to and the ability to recover it, that responsibility is up to the client. So really separating the concept here of infrastructure from the data that's included within there. So if you didn't have backup and Office 365 were to encounter some form of a significant issue, really what are the risks that are associated with it? And we'll get into 6 very specific ones in a few moments when Brandon will present those to you. But really we're talking here about the conceptual difference between continuity and recovery. So really data survivability. So We can talk, a lot about really different ways of protecting your messaging, whether that's backup, whether that's from a continuity perspective, or even from a journaling perspective for things like e-discovery for compliance regulations and for legal discovery purposes. But even with those other pieces in place, just like any really mission critical or business critical important data within your organization, you want to ensure that you have that data in a survivable state. So more and more we're hearing the term data survivability thrown around, and that's really taking the two concepts of disaster recovery and continuity and backup and merging those together to ensure that you have a complete, well thought out approach to how you're protecting the integrity of your data. So we have two examples here just showing directly from Microsoft's own site, the concept of data ownership. So if you're an Office 365 client leveraging their applications and their offering within your organization, it's still your data within Office 365. And as you can see here, in their own words, you own it, you control it. So the thing that's really not said here is that it's also your responsibility to ensure that it is backed up. So again, if 365 were to have an issue that they were no longer able to provide service, they could conceptually fail you over to another system within their platform and continue to deliver messaging to end users that you can send and receive throughout that process. But you may have issues with longer-term archiving of email. You may have to pull back some of your older data into that new platform to continue working with it. And here we have another example just showing that point-in-time restoration of specific individual mailbox items is not something that is natively and inherently a part of the platform. So if that were really important to you, the ability to actually drill into individual mailboxes and to specific items within those mailboxes from a restoration perspective, this is where you would do that. And this really lends itself well to the combined concept of doing journaling for your long-term archiving and for your e-discovery, in addition to doing backup for that longer-term data survivability and ensuring that you have some form of platform agnosticism that, again, should the likelihood of it happening is completely out of the realm of possibility. But let's say, for instance, Microsoft were to go out of business tomorrow, that platform could conceptually go away and the data along with it. So you want to ensure that you're working to have another copy of that data that lives elsewhere that is outside of those four logical walls controlled by that provider. Okay. So in terms of the responsibility model, you can see here, again, we're really just driving home the point of separating the concept of your specific company's Office 365 data from the underlying platform. So Microsoft will take the track here of ensuring that data replication is happening, that you have multiple data centers that are serving the offering that you're purchasing, whether that's Office 365 for messaging, SharePoint Online, OneDrive, any real combination of their specific services. From an infrastructure level, they're ensuring the physical security of that data center, ensuring that they have all of the security requirements from a network perspective and a data perspective, things like encrypted storage, data encryption in transit, intrusion detection and prevention, and application level security as well. So the ability to do things like multi-factor authentication, et cetera. So they're also providing the user and administrative controls for that offering. So the dashboard that you would use as an administrator to get in to do account provisioning, account removal, change, modify, add, et cetera. Then from the customer's responsibility perspective, now we're really talking about access to the data within your specific Microsoft Office 365 instance. And then the next logical step of that is knowing now that the data is yours to manage and to control, ensuring that you have a backup of that and ensuring that you are aware and have a fully formed concept of what your retention requirements around that data are. So you then are responsible for ensuring that you're protecting against things like accidental deletion, or if you have an internal individual user who is maliciously looking to go in to remove data, let's say prior to a termination, or even potentially look to maliciously remove data from another user's mailbox or OneDrive. Evidence tampering as well is something that's extremely important from an e-discovery and regulatory compliance perspective. So ensuring that you're covered there. Microsoft will make sure that the platform has the necessary protection in place to ensure the integrity of its data center and its offering. But the integrity of that data is the responsibility of the owner of that data, which is the individual Office 365 client. So we'll get into 6 very specific risks, and I'm actually going to pass the control over here to Brandon from Veeam. So Brandon, if you want to give a quick introduction, then I will advance the slides for you as we go.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Kevin, and thanks everyone for taking the time to join us today. So, as mentioned earlier, my name is Brandon McCoy. So I am a system engineer here at Veeam. I specialize in cloud, specifically for service providers who want to offer cloud services, and I'm located in Atlanta, Georgia. So we're going to get into the use cases of backup for Office 365. You know, Kevin kind of alluded to a few of those reasons, and we're going to kind of dive a little bit deeper into them. Hopefully by now you understand the shared responsibility model and kind of the misconceptions about cloud. You know, the term cloud in general kind of gets thrown around a lot, and it can mean a lot of different things. But at the end of the day, you know, your data is your data. So we'll start with these 6 ones, and we're going to look at each one in a little more detail: the accidental deletion, retention policy gaps, internal security threats, as well as external, legal incompliance, and also managing hybrid email deployments of on-prem and online Office 365. So the first one we're going to take a look at is accidental deletion. This is at the top of the list for a reason. You know, there's a lot of users, employees, and others out there who maybe just aren't too IT savvy, or you know, just don't really have time to pay attention to what they're doing. I'm sure everybody here has deleted an email once or twice in their life, maybe not meaning to. And Microsoft doesn't really care whether you delete an email or not. You know, you delete it, it may ask you, are you sure? And that's about it. Once things are deleted, you know, they will move into a recycling bin. That gets into more of the retention policies around that, which we'll get into further. But there's also hard deletes. So hard deletes are items that become purged. Once something is hard deleted, you can't get it back ever, no matter how important that email was. So that's one of the first reasons why we should protect our Office 365 backups. The second one is going to be retention policy gaps and confusion. You know, the Office 365 Exchange, SharePoint, and OneDrive all have their different retention policies. And while these may seem easy, you know, at a first look, it actually can become a little more complex, especially if you're having to manage a whole bunch of Office 365 users, different requirements. You know, maybe your C-level executives have certain requirements for their emails than the other employees. And so just managing that and understanding how Office 365 manages that data can sometimes lead to gaps in retention, and not even realizing until later that you've lost some emails that you thought you would have for a little bit longer. And we'll get into some specifics of how Veeam can handle that here down the road in a moment. The third is internal security threats, right? So the first one was accidental deletion. You know, hey, I didn't mean to do it. You know, it's just a mistake. But internal security threats, kind of like Kevin was alluding to, or where, you know, maybe an employee has malicious intent. Maybe he sent some emails that he or she regrets, needs to hide those emails, or, you know, wants to, you know, just cause some mayhem in the company before that person leaves the company. With you know, the Veeam backup for Office 365 product, once that backup is you know, in a storage, there is no it doesn't matter whether or not those things are deleted. Those emails will be there. You can always restore them, even if that employee has been removed from the Office 365 database. We are still able to retrieve those emails as we need. Okay, so let's take a look at the fourth one here. This is going to be external security threats. So like I was mentioning earlier, you know, people hear the word cloud and they think all is well. But, you know, as we like to say, the cloud is just someone else's computer. And I've actually seen some firsthand videos of ransomware strains that are cloud-based, right? You can find this on YouTube. There is a famous hacker who now works for the government to exploit weaknesses in systems and find vulnerabilities. I can't remember the guy's name, but he actually shows a video of a fake spam email that looks like it's from Microsoft. An employee or customer user would click on that email saying that they need to update their spam protection, and they'll click a few things. Next thing you know, all the emails in that person's exchange have been encrypted. You can't read any of them. and then you'll see another email pop up that you can read, and it says that you'll have to pay Bitcoin in order to get your emails back. So, not just deletion, not just retention policy gaps, but we also have to think about ransomware, encryption strains, and things like that. Just because it's in the cloud doesn't mean that it's not vulnerable to those kinds of things. Okay, then we get into legal and compliance requirements. So e-discovery, we have advanced find functionalities to help you find emails that maybe are a little harder to find. And you may have to keep these emails for certain periods of time for HR, for auditing and compliance. So being able to have your own retention policies and keep that data for as long as you need. As we can see here, fines and penalties can be associated. So there can be a lot of cost and risk associated with not having a backup of your Office 365 data that you control. Okay, finally, managing hybrid email and deployments. So I always like to say that Veeam is more than just a backup and recovery solution. We're also a migration tool, right? In today's industry, customers want to be able to take their data at their fingertips, almost like the internet, right? You want it on your phone, on your computer, everywhere you go. And so we want our data to be at our fingertips as well, whether it's on-prem, whether it's cloud native, and be able to migrate those things back and forth, right? So with the Veeam products and with Evolve, we are able to offer those kinds of solutions. So now we're going to take a look at some retention policies. Again, just looking at this slide, you may think, this isn't that hard to follow. I can figure this out. But it's kind of laid out here for you. In the real world, in business scenarios where you're running around all day trying to put out fires, and you have lots of things to focus on, you may not realize some of the retention policies that are here. So whether it's regular inbox data is kept for a couple of years, then moved to archived. The deleted items are really important. After 30 days, that recycling bin is deleted. When an employee leaves the company, you may find out months and months later, maybe they're trying to come back and bring some sort of lawsuit or something like that, and those emails are no longer available. If we can transition to the next animation here, this is a really cool slide that shows you the average length of time from data compromise to discovery, right? So 140 days, while default protections are from 30 to 90 days. So by the time you realize that you need an email from an ex-employee or some sort of litigation, human resources, it's too late. Those emails are already gone. Next slide, please. So with Veeam and Evolve IP, as you can see, it's all the way across the board, super easy. You can keep your data for the time period that you want. You control those retention policies. You can set the same retention policy for everything in the Exchange or Office 365 as a whole, and ensure that you're protected and you don't have to have any guessing with your retention. Okay. So while Microsoft Office 365 does eliminate the need for you to host, the overhead, the infrastructure, it's still just a service, right? They're just providing a platform for you to run your Exchange. They do not care about your data in terms of how long it's kept and how it's kept. They keep those their hardware secure, the patches, the updates. But at the end of the day, it's your business, your data, so it's your responsibility to control that. That is the shared responsibility model, and the shared responsibility model is something that you hear time and time again with cloud, whether that's infrastructure as a service, SaaS offerings, and these cloud native applications like Office 365. And I just want to quickly touch on kind of what the restoration looks like. We've talked about backing up the data, but how we get it back. So maybe, Kevin, if you want to kind of dive a little deeper into this, and I'll kind of pass it back to you to show how Evolve IP does it specifically with Veeam.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Brandon. I appreciate that. So the thing that I can really underscore here that's of most importance is that from our perspective, for our clients, this is actually a very simplistic process. I know we're talking a lot about things like retention periods and the risks associated with it, but as far as administering the actual backup solution itself, for anyone who's familiar at all with Veeam Cloud Connect, we're actually leveraging the same underlying technology to be able to do the Office 365 backup. So really, the Evolve IP solution is us provisioning a central repository on an individual per client basis that, as clients are protecting their individual Office 365 Exchange instances, are writing that data back to that repository. So let's say, for instance, you were interested in pursuing the solution, we decided to move forward with it. What we would provide you is a build-out custom repository that is yours and yours alone. It's an extension of a virtual private cloud that we create for you, with credentials that you would use in setting up your backup job within the 365 framework to write your backup data to that repository, as scheduled, and for recovery through a direct client portal from which you can start, initiate, and complete that process. And I know Brandon will be demonstrating some of that recovery capability in just a moment. Brandon, is there anything you would add to that from an architectural perspective?
No, I think you kind of hit it on the nail there, Kevin. I'm happy to demo it as well so we can get a little live demonstration. Okay, give me 1 second, guys. I pull this up here. All right. So this is the Office 365 interface. Normally this isn't going to be seen from a customer perspective. Evolve IP will be handling this, but just kind of, behind the scenes, behind the curtain, this is what it looks like. A customer's organization has a specific backup policy that you tell them you want, which objects that you need to back up in the Exchange environment or the SharePoint and OneDrive environment. But this is the Explorer. Right. So even from a customer side, you will have the ability to download and use the Veeam Explorers. So we have the Veeam Explorers for Exchange, SharePoint, and OneDrive. And I'm going to open them up real quick and show you how granular we can get. So Veeam Explorer for Exchange is, of course, the most popular one. This has been around for a while, and it is native to our Veeam Backup and Replication product, which so has the same support for your on-prem Exchange servers that you want to take snapshot-based backups of. So I'm just opening up one of the Exchange databases here. These are all the engineers at Veeam here. Try to find one that has a bunch of emails in it. Hopefully we got one. Tell you what, we'll open up this one. This is my boss. He should have something in here. There we go. So here's some emails that are in the Office 365 Exchange database. I can right-click on these. I can open them up, make sure it's what I'm looking for. So if I do need that email, I can restore it directly back into his email, his mailbox. I can restore it to another user's mailbox. I can export as a PST. I could even send this as a message, and I can save it directly to my desktop. Really cool thing here, this is some of the newer functionality, is we can also compare item properties. This is really important when you have some databases that have changed, some email accounts that have changed. Maybe somebody has done some of those internal deletions that we were talking about, but you're not exactly sure what happened or who made those changes. We can actually compare those changes and find out what's going on. Also, we have the advanced find feature. So again, this will allow you to drill down. Maybe you remember who sent it, but not the subject. Maybe you remember a key word in the email body, but you can't remember who sent it. Maybe you know the day it was sent. So you can really drill down with whatever values that you need until you find the email that you're looking for. Tons of stuff to kind of search through here. Okay, so that is the Exchange. 2.0 of this product, which is our latest release, also supports SharePoint and OneDrive. So we'll check out the Veeam Explorer for SharePoint. Again, we have this one for the on-prem SharePoint as well. And just an FYI, if you do have those hybrid deployments where you have on-prem and you have Office 365, the Office 365 backup product can back up both of those. So if you don't want to take snapshot-based backups of the virtual Exchange server, you could always do a mailbox level backup of those. Okay, so all this is doing is mounting the backup, by the way. So from a user customer experience, you don't really have to worry about this taking too long or not having enough space to restore because this is just the mount of the file itself. Okay, I'm going to open up my SharePoint here. don't know how much stuff we actually have, but you can kind of see here the different things, whether it's templates, libraries, documents. All the files support versioning, so if you have different versions of those files, you can restore those. Restore a whole site. Save these to a library, save as a zip. Send that database. If it's small enough, you can send it like as an email. Okay. And of course, the advanced find feature here as well. And then finally, our OneDrive. So this is the Veeam Explorer for OneDrive. So we'll load this up here. See, that didn't take too long either. And these are real OneDrive, SharePoint, Exchange accounts that are really in Office 365. So this would be about the real kind of experience you would get from a time perspective. Pretty fast there. So I believe we have some OneDrive stuff we just got. Yep. So we have a bunch of different files, right? I can view the history. I can restore that document. We can overwrite or keep, right? So maybe you want to keep the original document that is in OneDrive. So you can keep this. It'll just name it restore-file name, and that way you can compare the two, or we can overwrite the one that exists there. We can copy this document to the local server that you're on, and also send those in an email as well. So a lot of functionality there, very granular for the Exchange, SharePoint, and OneDrive, all included with your Office 365 backup. And with that, I'll pass it back over to you, Kevin.
All right, thanks very much, Brendan. So one great question and one great thing to really highlight here as to why do this solution with Evolve IP, right? So that can best be summed up in a couple of different things. So by default, by doing the solution with Evolve, we're looking to do this as a geodiverse series of data centers. So we're operating out of two Tier 4 data centers that are both based in the U.S. One in the East Coast region, one in the West Coast region. So specifically out of Philadelphia and out of Las Vegas, Nevada. The second is that by leveraging the solution as an Evolve IP offering, you're given access to the full breadth and width of the Evolve IP support team. So all US-based Evolve IP employees, providing both administrative support for solutions like this, as well as potentially end user support directly in some of our other offerings where help desk would be a requirement, things like desktop as a service, or actually if you're leveraging us for your Office 365 licensing, the ability to really help those end users directly and to also be your administrative middleman that you no longer have to worry about contacting Microsoft and being routed to whichever call center in the globe at that point in time is the one that's specifically able to answer your call. And now you're able to work with a direct team who has hands-on experience with the full breadth of this offering and industry knowledge of how that impacts your organization or your end users. The last piece is that you have the ability to add this as part of other services or other solutions that we could provide for you. So whether that's infrastructure as a service, desktop as a service, which you mentioned, potentially maybe disaster recovery of on-prem systems or systems that may exist elsewhere in another cloud environment. So the ability to have a single protective posture for the entirety of your cloud solutions, all in a single location. So again, that concept of really true accountability, trust, and organizational knowledge of that continuing to work together through every facet of your internal IT policy or practices. So in terms of an offer, we are doing a special for our Office 365 Veeam solution where we're offering free storage, free backup license, and free migration assistance for 3 months for a standard 3-year Evolve IP contract. And that could be contracting for this service directly or contracting for this service as well as maybe looking to do your Office 365 migration to the cloud. So maybe you're in an on-prem or a hybrid environment today, looking to really get over that hump and make that commitment to fully utilize Office 365 as your go-to solution for messaging, for file storage, for SharePoint, any number of the offerings within the enterprise level licenses for Office 365. If you come to us, with this offer, we can give you that storage for your backup, the licensing to back your systems up, and the migration assistance to help put all of those components in place so that you can start to leverage them right from day one. So with that, we can certainly open the floor up to any questions that you folks may have. Happy to try to answer anything here, and I believe Kelly will be doing the administration of those questions. So Kelly, I open the floor back up to you.
Great, thank you, Kevin. Thanks, Brandon. Yeah, we've got a few questions here. Here's one from Simon. Is this standalone app interface of Veeam Explorer the only available interface, or does it have any toolkit snap-in type version, for example, to integrate perhaps with Active Directory? That might be for Brandon.
Yeah, great question. Today, that is the only way that you can do that with the Explorer there. There are some roadmap things for API type web portals. For now, the Veeam Explorer is the way that you would access those restorations with Veeam and Evolve IP.
Okay. Thank you for that. Okay, here's Bobby just put something in. Is the licensing per seat or per user? That's a good question. Maybe Kevin?
That is a great question. Sure. Yeah, so I can go. So the licensing is going to be based on the number of licenses that you have in Office 365. So that would be a per user license for the 365 model for how many individual mailboxes you would require that we back up. And there may then be additional components around storage and sizing specific to those, but that's where we kind of view this as more of a consultory sales methodology. So we'll work with our individual clients to make sure that we're pricing this in a way that's most conducive for them and makes sense for their organization.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I also see a couple of questions here about pricing. Kevin, regarding pricing, is it best that someone just reach out directly to your sales team for pricing?
Yep, positively. There are a number of different variables that can factor in there. So very specifically, if you're engaged with us for other services, a lot of times there are some advantages, from a pricing perspective that we can work into other offerings such as this. So yeah, we would love to have those conversations with you. And again, kind of to harken back to our first slide, every organization with whom we work, we understand, a lot of times we're talking about the same technologies and leveraging it in the same way. But no two companies are exactly the same in terms of what their needs are and how we map the solutions to those needs. So let's definitely get in touch and we'll talk through those options and make sure from a pricing perspective we're doing everything we can to take good care of you guys.
Okay, here's another one. How long does it take to set up my Office 365 backup services with Evolve IP? And then also, where is your customer support team located?
Yep, so two great questions. So I'll answer them in reverse order here. The support team for Evolve IP is all located entirely within the continental United States. So we have some folks that are operating out of our headquarters, which is in Wayne, Pennsylvania, which is about 20 to 30 miles outside of Philadelphia. We also have support personnel who are operating out of Cleveland, Ohio, as well as Austin, Texas. And then we have another smaller support team that is on the West Coast as well, but we provide full 24/7, 365 coverage for this offering as well as our other offerings. In terms of deployment time, it's a very quick and easy solution for us to deploy internally. So I know we talked a little bit earlier, but really from our perspective as a cloud strategy and services provider, it's really just a matter of us provisioning a repository once we know the number of users and the amount of size, and then setting up credentials for that repository. So realistically, within a day or two of a contract signing, we can have that repository built. And then as far as going into actually configure the backup and the jobs, that's going to vary a little bit depending upon a client. If you wanted to go through that endeavor on your own and felt comfortable to do so, you'd have the ability to do that. If you wanted to engage with our support or professional services teams to assist with setting up and configuring that backup, we can do that as well. And that might take a day or two just in terms of the back and forth communication if we were to undergo that as a collaborative effort.
Great. One more here asking for clarification about how long they can keep your backups, or that you can keep their backups for them. I think earlier it kind of looked like eternity. Is that really the case?
So I'll answer this, Brandon, and then I'll actually defer to you for a little bit of an additional technical piece around it for any limitations the software may have. But from a repository perspective, it's simply just a matter of ensuring that we have enough disk to accommodate it. And then, yes, conceivably, we can go back as far as a client needs to. That said, Brandon, anything you would add in terms of limitations from the Veeam perspective with the application itself?
No, I mean, the only thing that I could put in there is that if a user was removed from Office 365 and or Active Directory, if it was linked to that, you wouldn't be able to restore that user directly back in without creating that user's privileges again. But the data is still there. You would still be able to export as PST, browse emails, send those emails somewhere else. So, yep, you can keep your data for as long as the storage will keep running.
Yeah, and I know that there are many of us with Exchange administration backgrounds who have worked in organizations where the retention policy was, we keep everything forever. And though I've often said I see no fault in that logic, certainly if there are regulatory governances that are facing your company, it's in your best interest to really not look to have an infinite retention policy. But we do know the reality of some organizations where, unfortunately, you don't have that luxury. So the more you can refine and define that process and those timelines, the better served you tend to be. But if you needed to really push this back to indefinite, and some companies face legal holds that can last years on active mailboxes, we can accommodate that for you.
Okay, thank you. One last question here. I'm not sure I understand this. So what happens when you no longer have a contract with the emails?
Yeah, I don't know if I understand that either. If maybe they're thinking when you no longer have a contract with Microsoft, maybe if you move off of that platform, we may have to. But I mean, again, the backup is separate from everything else. So the data, once it's been backed up, you still have the ability to view those emails to PST export. You may just have to figure out some other way if you need to restore those emails and you no longer have an Office 365 relationship.
Okay, clarification just came in on that question. If you no longer have a contract with Veeam.
Yeah, Veeam, it doesn't matter. The only, if you were purchasing your own Veeam and you decided to stop using them, you would just you wouldn't be getting support for Veeam anymore, but you would still have that email access. Now, I don't know if it's different with Evolve IP in terms of them holding on to your data. Maybe Kevin can chime in there.
Yeah, absolutely. So we would maintain the active repository for our clients for as long as that client were under contract. If you were approaching the end of that contract and decided that you weren't going to renew, again, from a data ownership perspective, just like we talked about with the Microsoft data itself, you own the data. So you would have every availability to do an export of it, prior to the end of that contract, if you wanted to go through and do restorations of that data to PST files, or look to restore that back into actual user mailboxes if you were transitioning to another provider to offer the same type of service. But we really only continue to provide the repository space while that repository is part of a contractual offering with our client here.
Yeah, and I would just further add, just in case we're looking at this from another way, the restoration capabilities with the Exchange Explorers and whatnot. So if you're looking at that from, I already own Veeam, I'm going to use Evolve IP to store my Office 365 backups, and I'm going to use my Veeam Explorer to do restores. The Veeam Explorers can still be used even if you are no longer paying for Veeam. The fact that you are a Cloud Connect customer with Evolve IP, and they've created you as a tenant, you can use that tenant credentials to still use the Explorer functionality without a licensed copy of Veeam.
Okay. Well, guys, that wraps up the questions I have over here. So do we turn it back to Bob?
We can. I just appreciate everybody attending. And any parting words here today, Brandon or Kevin?
Yeah, this is Kevin. Just want to thank everybody for. Sorry, Brandon, go ahead.
Oh, no worries. I was just going to say probably the same thing. Thanks everyone for joining, and stay safe out there in the cloud world and the online backups.
Yeah, we absolutely appreciate the time today. I know how much of a commodity time can be sometimes. So, again, we're happy to entertain further discussions. If you guys have any questions coming away from this, feel free to please reach out to us. Let us go through that. We can answer any other follow-up you may have as you walk away from today's demonstration and presentation. And again, just remember the offer that we have for the free storage, free backup licensing. If you look to engage with Evolve IP for the solution, our contact information is right up there on the screen. Myself and Erica Von Hoyer. Both of us would be beyond thrilled to talk to any of you who might look to maybe engage in a solution or just looking for any additional clarification around our offerings or the functionality of the product itself. But again, thank you guys for the time. Really appreciate it.
All right, wonderful. Thanks again, everyone, for their attendance here today. We again hope you gather some great information from today's webinar. DRJ would also like to thank Kevin and Brandon for their time here today, as well as Evolve IP and Veeam for sponsoring the webinar. We will be emailing everyone a link to the recording, and you may view this recording as frequently as you wish or share it with your peers. If you do have any additional questions, please contact Disaster Recovery Journal. Thank you again for joining us, and have a great rest of your day.